So I guess that's the reason for the last names. So I will try to time myself because, well, at least all of you know, when you talk about this topic, you get very excited, so you can't really stop yourself. So I'm going to be speaking a bit about a CO2 infrastructure network, challenges and opportunities, and it will be very much from a European perspective. Now, I'm in the great situation that since I come after so many great speakers, some of the things I'm touching upon has already been mentioned. I will try to avoid too many kind of overlaps, but as well, sometimes maybe we'll have some more time left for some questions in the end. So let's see. So quickly about Bellona, who I am representing. We are originally a Norwegian NGO. Here is our founder, together with the very popular band from Norway, a-ha, one of our very proud moments. And we decided to establish offices in Brussels, where I am based, in 1994, after the Norwegian referendum that famously said no to EU membership. Bellona was of the opinion that since the climate change is a global challenge, we need to be where decisions are made. So we said yes to EU membership on our own behalf. We also have an office in Berlin since 2021, and I think it is tomorrow. My colleague Anne Müller will be presenting a CCS ladder looking into the prioritization of CCS and where it should be used. So I recommend you all to participate in that. What we do at Bellona is that we try to work for achieving a restorative carbon-negative society through a just and democratic transformation. Now, carbon capture and storage is one of the ways in which we try to work towards this, but we also work on a range of other issues and technologies. One of the things that we are famous for is kind of having changed, I think, our identity a bit, or trying to at least have a dual identity. We started as a very activist organization. There's many pictures and news stories of members of Bellona tying themselves or chaining themselves to different outbuildings of things, and also breaking in at times to facilities. We are very proud of that history for being part of identifying problems, but we're also very proud of now being a part of identifying and deploying the solutions to address them. So that is something that we try to focus on and highlight. When it comes to carbon capture and storage, we work in particular on carbon capture and storage on industrial decarbonization. And Bellona has been very active on carbon capture and storage for many years. They were also part of the time period that Chris mentioned earlier. I sadly was not. I'm a bit too young for that, so I had some other things going on. But it certainly is very inspiring for someone like me coming into this a bit late in the game to hear the stories of what happened back then when we saw a rising momentum for CCS that sadly failed. So our aim right now is to try to make sure that that does not happen again. This time we cannot afford that this CCS market that we need does not deploy or materialize at scale. So this time, as was mentioned as well, the focus on CCS is very different. It is no longer focused on power production, it is focused on industrial decarbonization. What we focus on when we talk about carbon capture and storage is CCS as a public good. For us, it is very clear that if CCS could materialize on its own, if a market could materialize on its own, it would have happened. It has not. Maybe at some point in the long term it would, but we do not have the time to wait for this. So we hear this from developers, we hear this from almost everyone involved in the burgeoning market of CCS. There is a necessary need for public support. This includes public funding, but it also includes public support in the sense of clearer legislation, having the right kind of market conditions surrounding the development and deployment here. And when you have something that is a public good and you are investing public money in it, we also see that there is a very strong case for ensuring the proper functioning of such a market, which is why we are very excited and working very hard towards ensuring a correct regulation of this market, because we want it to benefit the public if the public is participating to paying for it and investing in it. Yeah, and here we have some more on this, actually comparing it to the development of the sewage system in this publication, An Industry's Guide to Climate Action, on our website, if anyone is interested. But one of the things we look at when we look at what kind of regulation do we need is why hasn't CCS materialized? Now, this has already been mentioned by some of the earlier speakers. So, of course, we talk about externalities. We are not pricing emissions. We have tried, and we are trying with something that is as successful as I think that we have found so far as a system, the EU ETS. But of course, we still have challenges related to that, and also Europe is rather alone, you could say, in its ambition. We have seen CBAM, which was mentioned here earlier today. I'm very excited to hear that CBAM is mentioned more, also as an opportunity and not just as something that is a challenge. We are actually trying now to work towards getting international platforms talking about how several different international CBAMs together could shift part of their revenue to least developed countries that would in fact be aligned with WTO law as kind of an environmental tool. So this is something we're very excited about. Another problem that we also see when we're talking about the carbon price is, of course, not just what level it is at, but also its volatility. This is something that contributes to investment risks. But in and of itself, that is not enough. So we have the public good. We have that there is a significant disparity in the returns from technology developments for first movers contra second movers. So this is also one of the reasons why it doesn't necessarily incentivize a lot of first movers in the market, which is why we need public intervention, which also is in our way, or in our opinion, why if we look here on natural monopolies, which is number 4, which is something that is very easy to start when you have capital-intensive infrastructure, we think it's very important also to have a regulatory measure from either governments, or in this case, we think it would be better if it was from the European Union, to ensure that you actually have enforced competition in the markets, because it's not going to materialize on its own. And we think the justification for this is the public support that is actually needed to put this market off the ground in any case. We also have the issue of imperfect information. This is something that we will have to work on for quite a long time. This is not an easy fix. We do see already now with particular platforms such as the CCUS Forum established by the European Commission, that this is something that is improving. We are putting actors together. We are trying to also resolve some of the misconceptions around CCS. And this will particularly be important when we get to the public perception issues, which I will speak on a bit more on the next slide, which also, of course, we cannot disregard one of the many elephants in the room. There is an election next year of the European Union, and we will depend on these solutions being popular and getting political support. Of course, we have the complementary markets, the chicken and egg issue, which I don't think I need to explain to anyone here. I think everyone is quite well versed in that. One of the issues that we are seeing here, of course, and has been pointed at for a very long time, is the lack of CO2 storage. And again, to commend the Commission, the target instituted in the Net Zero Industry Act is something that we are incredibly pleased to see, and we think this is going to go a long way in kickstarting this development. As Chris mentioned already, this is something to build on for the future, and this is also why the strategy that is coming is something of a really important milestone. So I thought, as my last slide, I will look into some of the ongoing processes, some of the things to look out for. And first, I wanted to explain why we think it's so important to look at a European infrastructure network for CO2. And this is because we do not see one country being able to do this alone. Denmark, Norway have a lot of storage capacity, but it would not be possible for them to develop that storage capacity and fill it with their own CO2, at least not in the way that we think CCS should be used. And it also would not really tackle the crux of the issue here, which again is that climate change is a global issue. When we're talking about Europe, that doesn't mean that we're only going to limit this to Europe, but we have to start somewhere. So I think here Maybe we could start with the Net Zero Industry Act, which was also mentioned. We have, for example, this target of 50 million ton storage to be developed by oil and gas producer by 2030. This is exceptional. To be able to introduce actually something which is actually also supported by a lot of oil and gas companies themselves, an obligation to develop this storage. It is quite unique when it looks into setting precedences. One thing that now with the ongoing political processes, to give you a bit of insight into that in the trilogues, or sorry, not the trilogues, but just the different kind of institutions figuring out their positions, is that we are seeing that there are some member states who are actually trying to remove this target from the Net Zero Industry Act. Now, of course, some of these countries that are pushing for this, you can try to figure out exactly why, but it's some of the countries that are quite far along when it comes to developing storage. So what we are concerned about is that, of course, a further development of a storage site across Europe based on oil and gas producers from those specific countries would, of course, increase the competition. That would also reduce the price and maybe wouldn't benefit the kind of head start some of the countries have. So this is something that we see as not beneficial to the common EU public good of decarbonization of industry. So we're trying to work very hard against that. And we want to keep the European Commission's proposal as it is. We think that is a great job done, and we don't think there's a need to change the wording in that. Another point here, which is trying to being changed right now, is trying to move the currently suggested EU target, as you could see on Chris's slides, saying that when EEA implementation has happened, including Norwegian implementation, then the target should be adjusted. Currently, what is also we're seeing a push towards is trying to make the target as it is now, an EEA target, without necessarily adjusting the 50 million tons upward. So that means basically that you would have, of course, you have a lot of delays in EEA implementation, so you would have a delay where there's additional risk into these investments, because should you be developing them in Norway, should you be developing them in Europe or in the EU, what should you be choosing? That's an unnecessary investment risk that we don't need, given all of the risks we already have in this market. Additionally to this, it's actually quite uncertain to what extent the EU would have a mandate to tell Norwegian oil and gas producers, for example, that they would have to develop storage if it's not implemented by the EEA. So setting this in as an EEA target from the start without implementation, it makes no sense. So again, we would like to call for ensuring that the European Commission's language on this really remains. We also, I see I'm running a bit low on time, so I'm going to kind of finalize with one thing that we see as very crucial for ensuring the proper functioning and the proper development and deployment of the European CO2 infrastructure network. And that is the need for a harmonized regulatory framework. We already saw that that is something that it's been thinking of including in this upcoming strategy. This is also NTEC here. I included the terms of reference for some reason, so I think you should probably follow the link in Chris's presentation here. The main conclusions from the NTEC report on the need or the justifications for a regulatory, some kind of legislation to regulate the market, actually aligns very well with some of the CCUS forum's working group reports, such as the infrastructure working group, which also outline the need for preventing natural monopolies that have a very high likelihood of arising in the start when you're trying to kickstart such a market by regulation. We don't want to strangle a market before it has arisen. We don't want to over-regulate, but we need some kind of regulation on open access infrastructure, on price setting and transparency, on standards and specifications, because this will be a market that has very many different areas and very many different technologies and capture streams. So we need to ensure that this is developed in a harmonized way. And I think there we can also tie it back to this market failure that we see of lacking information or imperfect information, because we do need to connect all of the different developments in Europe so that we can see a holistic development also of the infrastructure so that it can connect to each other in the future. And with that, I have 30 seconds left, so I'll just quickly mention that another issue, of course, that we are seeing is public perception, which I mentioned also with the upcoming elections. One of the things that Bellona is trying to do is that we have a campaign where we try to show some of the stories on the ground, some of the needs for CCS, some of the misconceptions. We use this hashtag here. And if there are anyone here in this room who would be interested in trying to kind of address some of the misconceptions around CCS on the ground, please get in touch. We would love to hear from you. And with that, I think that was it.
Thank you very much, Lina. And can I just ask, are there any burning questions of clarification?